Well, good morning. It's good to see you all here this morning. As you know, we've been studying Colossians, and we are at Colossians 3, verses 20 through 21. And those verses say this. It says, "Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged." And if you look through the New Testament, there's actually very little direct instruction on how to parent. There's not a whole lot there as far as telling parents how to parent. There's a lot on relationships, and so you know what to teach and you know how to interact with your children. But as far as direct instruction on parenting, there's not much there. There's a parallel passage in Ephesians 6. It says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy life, a long life on earth. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord." And that pretty much sums up the instruction that's directly talks to parents about parenting. In Proverbs, it has a lot of things that kind of repeat itself. Kids probably will not like this, but you'll find a theme in here. Proverbs 13:24, "Whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them." Or Proverbs 19:18, "Discipline your children, for in that there's hope. Do not be a willing party to their death." Proverbs 20, verse 7, "The righteous lead blameless lives. Blessed are their children after them." Proverbs 22:6, "Start children off in the way they should go. Even when they're old, they will not return from it." And Proverbs 23:13-14, "Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you punish them with the rod, they'll not die. Punish them with the rod and save them from death." And Proverbs 29:15, "A rod and a reprimand impart wisdom, but a child left undisciplined disgraces its mother." And probably the most complete description of what parenting looks like is actually found in Deuteronomy chapter 6. And it says this, it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commandments I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates." And I think what you can conclude from those verses there is that parenting is really a full-time job. And so this morning, what I'd like to do, instead of me preaching a sermon about parenting, we're actually going to do a panel discussion. And it's going to be a little different. Londa and I are going to talk about parentings with our parents. So just so you know, this does not mean that we think we were raised perfectly or that they did everything right, but I think they did a good job. I think we're blessed that they are there. There's a lot of wisdom. I think Phil and Jane's been in the ministry for over 30 years. They've raised 4 kids, have 8 grandkids. My parents have 6 kids, 23 grandkids, I think, and 16 great-grandchildren. So there's a lot of wisdom here. So if you all want to come up and you're just Mom and Dad and Phil and Jane, and Mom and Dad, you can just sit here in the middle. Phil and Jane, you can sit on this side, and Londa and I will sit here. It was kind of interesting. Phil said this morning he's more nervous than preaching. And no, well, that's all right. So the other thing was some are more willing to be up here than others. We thought maybe we'd just have my mom and Phil. So I'm going to give you this. you guys can just share that mic then. So I do appreciate you all doing this. And as we go through and we ask questions, if you don't have anything to share on that, you don't need to feel like you have to share. But my first question for both couples is, as you went into parenting, did you have any like overarching philosophy or general goals or rules that you applied in your parenting? And I don't care who goes first. Who would like to share first? Phil, you can go ahead if you'd like.
Well, I can say that I don't think we have planned for anything spectacular to be our guide for parenting. I guess the more I think about it as parenting, the reason I'm half scared is that it's been so long that our children are grown up. But the more as I think back and reflect some of the things that we did as parenting, this may sound, I guess I don't know what the word is, stupid or dumb, but I think parenting is to be something that's supposed to be simple. And the reason I'm saying that is that I think God has given us the instruction in His book, first of all, of how we are to respond. And so my number one picture is that if we as parents, we as a husband and wife, became parents, mother and father, our focus has got to be on Jesus Christ. That's where we start. And I think that's the beginning, that's the foundation of I'm setting my focus on Christ. As the Lord blessed us with children, I want them to see that Jesus Christ is the center of our life.
Well, I guess I would just like to emphasize that we aren't up here because we did a perfect job or a better job than anybody else. In fact, you all probably did the same things we will say we did. But if Tim asked us these questions, and it made us think, and a lot of these things we just did without, in the same way that you all did. But I guess one of our goals that we didn't even just voice was to bring our children into the kingdom with a love and desire to follow Jesus. And then we weren't real sure what Tim had in mind about the philosophy, but I guess one of the things that we did going into parenting was our goal was to have a united front, whether we agreed with each other or not. And we gave them freedom to do many things. And another thing that was just a given is that every time the doors to church would open up, they were expected to be there, and they were there. And I think that was one of our goals. Well, it wasn't even a spoken goal, it was just there.
I think the main thing is that we are examples, and our life, as the children learn to pattern our life, they automatically do some of the same things that we do. And so as far as an overarching philosophy, I think it was basically that we bring them to Jesus and allow Jesus to mold their lives as He desires.
Okay, some of these were already talked about a little bit. Like, ultimately, our goal is to see that our children enter into the kingdom of God. So were there practices that you did that built a love for Jesus in your children? And along with that, which, Mary, you did talk a little bit, is how do children learn to love church and the work of the church?
I think maybe the thing there again is as they observe our actions and our patterns of living, they can learn from that, and that becomes a part of their philosophy also. Children tend to, what's the phrase? They tend to catch more than what they are taught, just observation.
What I have down here in regards to the question about helping our children to learn to love the church and the work of the church, I put a lot of that responsibility back on us as parents. If our children do not see us loving the work of the church or being involved in the church, I'm afraid they're not going to love the church neither. And so I really believe that a lot of the questions that made us think was, where were we as parents? Of course, being in the ministry, I better love the church. No, it was part of our life. And the church was very important to us. And it wasn't a question of whether or not we're going to church. It was just, that's what we do. We wanted them, our children, to have the interest of, yes, church is important. And so when it comes to loving the church, I think we all need to look at ourselves, and I'm talking about the home church that we grew up in, or the church that I'm a part of. Do I really love what's taking place in the church? Am I a part of it? Am I making the church functional? And we all have a part in doing that. And I believe that's what our children need to see. Do they see their parents as parents who really love going to church? Do they really see them being a part of the church? Do they see them as instrumental in making the church grow? I don't know how much time we have on the question, but there's one thing that my parents handed down to me, and we tried, I want to use the word we tried very hard to implant in the lives of our children. Growing up in my home community, my church life, there was no perfect church, but I never heard my parents ridicule or complain about the church. I'm sure there were those issues that came up, but they never discussed it to us as a sibling, as a family. And so I have learned to really appreciate what my parents gave to me. And I wanted to that was very much instrumental. One of the aspects of giving to my children was I want my children to see the beauty of church life. I'm sure they probably knew there were church issues growing up here, part of this church, but we did not want to share those kinds of things with our children. And I really believe that has been I think, my testimony of what I see in the lives of my children is that they love the church.
And another thing to build the love for Jesus is I think family devotions is very important. And also we were blessed to be able to send our children to a Christian school. And I know it was more expensive, but it's worth it. Right. And I like to see children carry their Bibles to church. That's your textbook.
I guess this is not necessarily on that, but just going back to, mention family devotions and those things. For a lot of people, that's very hard to do. I know in our life sometimes it's hard to do that every day, or at least most days. Do you have any suggestions or anything that you would recommend? We want to get started, but it's just things get busy and you don't know what to talk about, kids get bored, they want to lay around on the floor or whatever. Wow, that's going on, all these things. If you had kids, I'm sure you know, you've seen it. Do you have any suggestions or any practical advice for somebody that wants that?
Or did you have a time, like it was always in the mornings or after supper or?
Our time was in the morning, and it is very difficult. But when we took over the business, then Raymond would go to work early in the morning, but then he would come home when the children got up in the morning for breakfast, and then we would have our quiet time or our devotional family devotions. But that took a lot of effort. And I think that maybe over the years things changed. I don't remember what it was like when. Well, you would remember that.
Just to give you some context, if you don't know our family, Teresa is my oldest sister, and our family, mom and dad had 4 kids in 4.5 years. Okay? 10 years later, I'm the surprise. And then 5 years later, there was another surprise. So sometimes they say, raising the second set of kids. I'm the second set of kids, or part of the second set of kids. So one thing I do remember, though, and sometimes it wasn't, I know we worked through the Firm Foundations curriculum that was out, and also just a simple devotional as well that we read through. I remember those times.
I remember Keys for Kids with Uncle Charlie, and I remember kneeling to pray and getting reprimanded by Dad one time, and I was laughing, I think.
That must be genetic. Just kind of, just something that you mentioned. I'll try to put in little anecdotes here that I remember as well. I know Mom said that and Dad said they tried to put a united front. And sometimes as siblings, we talk about that sometimes there was a directive given, and it was usually also given by Dad. And so, that's what we were supposed to do. And sometime later, that directive was softened a bit. And we always thought, probably somewhere behind the scenes, there was a conversation between Mom and Dad that came back to us a little softened than it was before. I don't know if that's how it happened. You might be able to chip in on that more.
I tended to be more abrupt with my decisions. Like if they ask, can they do this or that, I might just off the cuff say no. And then Mary would reconsider for me. And then I could change my answer.
Well, thank you for that. One thing, Dad, that I've heard you say was that raising children is a lot like training horses. You've had horses your whole life. There's always been horses around the house. And one thing you want to say is you want to break their will but not their spirit. What do you mean when you say that?
Well, oftentimes, I shouldn't say often, sometimes we demand more of our children than what they are capable of delivering. And then if they don't deliver up to our expectation, then we might belittle or demean them. And that doesn't make for willing children to follow what you're wanting them to do. And so sometimes then the parents also demand things or performances from their children that would make the parent look good. It might not feel good to the child, but at least if it is accomplished, it would make the parent feel good. So often, or sometimes, we tend to ask our children for things that are only for our benefit, or more for our benefit than the benefit of the child. And so in training a horse, If you come in a conflict with the horse and he refuses to do what you want, you don't want to put the horse away at that point because the horse knows that he won. So what you do, you back off to something that the horse is very, very familiar with and can accomplish very easily. And you do that, and then at that point you put your horse away. And that's the same way with a child. If you ask a child to do something that is too difficult, rather than berating them for not doing it or not being able to, compliment them for what they did do, the performance that they did perform. And then the next time they might be able to achieve what you wanted them to do today.
And this, and you both can answer this. This goes into our next question. What does the Bible say about gentle parenting? You know, being gentle as you parent, and how have you found that?
Well, I didn't find anything in the Bible that specifically said that, but my mind went to Psalms 23 about the Good Shepherd, and in Ezekiel 34 and John 10, and we are to be shepherds of our children. And when you look at the way a shepherd cares for the sheep, I think that that's a model for us parents. And I don't ever read that the shepherd was harsh or made his sheep do anything for the shepherd's benefit. The shepherd always protects and gently leads. One of my favorite verses as a young parent, when the 4 children were all little, was he shall gather the lambs in his arms and carry them in his bosom and gently lead those that are with young. So my idea of gentle parenting would be a picture of a shepherd that lays down his life, sacrifices whatever it takes for the good of the child.
Yeah, I found that to be a very interesting question. I'm not sure if I ever heard it somehow express what does it mean to be a gentle or be gentle parenting. And some of our observation was that I think a lot of times I agree with what Mary said about the shepherd aspect of it, but how do we come across with our tone of voice to our children? I really believe that how we come across to our children and our tone of voice is going to speak volumes to how a child is going to react. We don't all have good days as parenting. We all would recognize that. But when our child does make a mistake, how do we respond? What's our tone of voice? And I think my wife did a great job in that.
Another thing from Ephesians 6:4, don't keep scolding and nagging them until your children become angry and resentful, you know.
I remember when I was in school, and I remember overhearing a fellow classmate, I'm not sure, talking to their teacher, and I was like, wow, you're not supposed to talk to a teacher like that. So my question is, how do you get children to learn to respect authority?
Well, I would probably say that it's a lot by example. And at our house, I don't think you were ever allowed to talk disrespectful to us or anybody else. although I don't ever remember saying specifically you aren't allowed to be disrespectful, but I always felt that it was very important to know what a child is thinking or saying. And so I always wanted to know what they're feeling. And so I would always say, well, you can say exactly what you want to say, and I want to know what you feel, but say it in a nice way. And also, when they interacted with each other, they were supposed to say it nicely, and if they didn't, they were supposed to repeat it. And one of our children thinks she had to repeat many things.
I think that's actually very important. One thing that sometimes in talking with people in ministry and things I've interacted, there's some feelings that there's sometimes you get the sense that people were told that there's certain feelings that you should not have, that you can't have. And having those feelings, it's wrong to have those feelings, which in a sense that might be, it should just warn you of another problem. Having those feelings is not sin or wrong. And I think by you saying, well, you can say whatever you want, but you just need to say it in a nice way. Valid allows you to say, yeah, I'm feeling this, and it's all right if I feel this way. I just need to express this in a way that is acceptable, in a way that is respectful to those around me, especially those in authority.
When a child can't express what he's feeling, then he will act it out in a negative way.
So this leads into another question. When those times of disobedience and disrespect happen, what kinds of discipline did you use or did you find effective?
Well, we always tried to make the discipline fit the offense. I think that's very important. The consequence should fit the offense also. Sometimes the consequence is easy, and other times the consequence is more severe and it costs more. But I think the ultimate goal should be for the discipline to meet or be equal to the offense. Not equal, but you know what I mean.
I think we saved spanking for deliberate disobedience and used natural consequences whenever possible. I remember one of our children, I don't know if they had gone to school yet, but they came up the basement steps with very dirty, muddy boots, and they should have known better. But instead of spanking them, they had to wash up the steps. They didn't do it perfectly, but the lesson was you are responsible for what you mess up. And then another time, this is an example of direct disobedience. We were varnishing our hardwood floor, and Raymond had said, don't step on it. And so one of our little people just put his big toe across the line, which that needed to be spanked. Oh, and we never disciplined for mistakes they made. Mistakes were mistakes.
Teresa was a very easy child to raise from beginning to end. But she had a problem of spilling water at almost every meal, it seemed like. But she was never spanked for that.
I think as you look at your children, each child is different, their personality, their character. I know for maybe one or two of ours, just had to look at them, and they would, I guess, cry because they knew they did something, we didn't approve of it. And there was occasions where some spanking needed to be done. But I think we were blessed with our children. I could just say it that way. I mean, I felt that they were expected to be obedient, but yet at the same time, they understood where mom and dad were coming through and why we discipline.
And I remember we would be so sad when someone got a spanking, especially the one that got most of them, who we're talking about. I told Tim once, I said, well, when that happened, it was almost like a funeral because me and my others were just so sad.
That didn't happen in our house at all. I know. There was very little pity for anybody who got a punishment. One time I remember my sister Crystal, she got spanked. I thought it was so funny. And I just laughed and was laughing. And Dad goes, you can either be quiet or you want to get one yourself. So that shows you a little difference in personality of the families. And this goes, one thing I should add, I don't, when it comes to spanking and things like that, I don't ever remember either one of my parents ever spanking me in anger. Ever. And yeah. One thing that is, and I tell people this as well, if you have an anger issue and you have problems controlling your temper, spanking is probably not the discipline, or probably should not be the discipline that you're using, because when you come out in anger, it's very easy to cross the line from discipline to abuse. And so that is if you are a parent and you have a child and you have an anger issue and that you can't control your anger, you better take care of that anger before you use spanking as a punishment. But one thing as well, and I just add to this, I know that when I was spanked, because I got a few, but one thing that two things that I remember. One was after the spanking, I always remember it was almost a cleansing. And you would sit on either mom or dad's lap, and there was a gentleness and there was a care after that. And you knew, well, the other thing that you knew was that it didn't matter. That topic was going to be dropped. It was not going to be brought up again. And that was done. And it wasn't going to be brought back to haunt you or to brought up in another time, but that it was done. And that was something that, when I look back, it was something that I think I appreciate a lot.
Well, my testimony on spankings, afraid I don't really have many. No, I wasn't that good.
I guess my testimony was from my home life. My mother, we had 3 stories, flights of steps. And when somebody needed a spanking, she would take us way up to the attic so she had time to cool off before she did spank. And then also afterwards, we told her, like, we love you, or that was the meaning that we needed to tell them we love you, and we did.
So we hear a lot today that people say it's just hard to find good workers. How do you get children to learn to enjoy and value work?
I don't know how we, or if we taught to love work, but Teresa has a hard time just sitting and doing nothing, so I don't know how she learned that. But I do remember the first 4 children when we lived in LaVale, they needed to clean up the horse pasture by hand with a shovel, and our kids would say they think Raymond just sits and thinks about work they need to do.
Well, again, I think this comes back to us as parents, or at least the breadwinner, I guess you might say. How did the children see their father? Did he enjoy going to work? I think makes a big, tremendous testimony to the child to look at, hey, Dad enjoys working. And then to build that trust with your children and to help your children to see the value of work. And I think part of our training our children was that, you know, you don't get paid for everything you do. There's a sense of helping others. That aspect, I think, is very important, that we don't think that because a neighbor wants you to do something, of course, neighbors would pay you anyway, but I don't think we need to have a mindset that go do something and expect pay for it. But yet, at the same time, we who grew up on a farm, we had plenty of work. And our situation was different. I wasn't on a farm anymore, but on a public works, plus the ministry later. I guess I give my wife credit for finding things for our children to do. But yet, at the same time, I think they catch from their parents that they like to work. And it's not about working all the time. I think family life, we are to have fun. Family life needs to have fun.
I think another important thing is that the child is able to see the end of their work for a given day. Mary has every day of the week, she has a list of things that she does every day of the week. And that's kind of how she did for the children. They each had chores to do, but they knew that when those chores were done, then they were free to do their thing. And if you have a chore that you want your child to do and you say, well, do this, and then I'll tell you what to do next, and then, you know, it seems like it's never ending. But if they have a list and they know that when they come to the end of the list, then, you know, they're free to do whatever. That gives them a goal to work for. And that's kind of how it is in our adult life, too. You know, we know that we have certain things we have to do, but at the end of the day, if we come to the end of our list, then we're done, too.
We also made lists, not every day, but I think they just enjoyed that they could mark it off.
And I'm doing that with my kids in the summer. I do that.
So setting a goal and having a sense of accomplishment of what they have done. One thing that Phil, you said was it's not always about work, it's about also having fun. And I think that's something that I appreciate. And I talking with people too. I think it's something that's very important, that as a parent that you find something that you can enjoy with your children that's not work. My dad and I we're pretty different personality-wise in many ways, but there's a couple things that we both really enjoy. And one of those, well, a few things actually. We really like to hunt. So a lot of our memories are with hunting. A lot of our memories are with horses. We spend a lot of times with horses. It was pretty much given for a lot of years that every Sunday afternoon we would do a trail ride somewhere. And the other thing was traveling. We traveled. A lot of the memories that we have together and the fun times we have together is probably wrapped up in those three things. And so that's something that was very important in my life growing up was that time. I was just looking at the time, and it's the one that you wanted to make sure we ask. Okay. One thing I did want to talk about, though, especially to mom and dad, though all your children are walking with Jesus now, it hasn't always been that way. There were times of rebellion. And one couple questions. How did you keep your relationship with that child despite that rebellion? And what advice would you give to those who might be walking that journey right now?
Well, that's sort of a difficult question. I don't know that the child necessarily rebelled against us. The child was never disrespectful towards us, even though the child was making wrong decisions, which was very sad for us. But the child knew what our expectations were for Christian living, and whenever there was a difference, they would be confronted, and it would be discussed, and I guess I just remember this one time when this child was trying to make a right decision, and it was like a loss in what he thought was, what he wanted. And I just remember this child going up to his bedroom, and so I just went up also, and I said to him, even though what you were doing is wrong, it was wrong, and you don't want to do it anymore, this is still a feeling of loss and pain, and I want you to know that I understand that. And then, of course, a lot of fasting and prayer. And I guess, there again, I felt like it was important to listen and listen and listen whenever there was an opportunity to have dialogue, and let the child say what he feels if he wants to. So, yes, I don't know if that answers your question.
I think oftentimes when a child rebels, a parent is inclined to think that they're rebelling against them. My opinion is that in most cases, the child is rebelling against what he knows is right. And that causes a wrong behavior but the rebellion itself is not necessarily against the parent. And so if you differentiate between that, your response to that rebellion might be different if you don't take it personally, see actually where the rebellion is going to.
Thank you for that. I think those are good answers. So we've been talking for about almost 35 minutes, 40 minutes. And so one thing that I would just like in closing here, if you could parent over, what would you do more of and what would you do less of?
I would probably attempt to do more one-on-one time than I did. Less of. Probably try to be less, I'm not sure if the critical is the right word, but less critical of what the child does or did not do.
Thinking back, I thought that I would like to play more with my children, but then when I tried to figure out where I would have had time, then I'm not sure. But yes, I would just like to enjoy the children more. I did enjoy them, but looking back, I would like to enjoy them more. And then when I just see these young families with little children, I just think, oh, just enjoy every day. But I do enjoy this season of life also when the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren come home to our house. I enjoy that a lot.
To tell you the truth, I think if I'd have to do it over, I'd do pretty much the same way we did. Maybe we would have done more traveling or with the family.
Well, this came to my in my sleep last night. I think is a pretty good response. What I would, some areas, probably most of you are familiar with the Caring for the Heart Ministries. We got acquainted with that. Matter of fact, they were here in the community a number of years ago. And I asked myself the question, did I really care for my child's heart the way I should have as a parent? And it's still a good question I think every parent should ask their child. It's a good question that every spouse should ask their spouse. Do I really care for your heart?
Well, I just want to thank you all for sharing and being honest, and just give them a round of applause for what they've done.